Right, let's focus on Manchester City. 4 Premier League titles in a row, but there is this independent hearing into their Premier League charges looming. 115 Premier League charges.
This is the case that could change the history of the Premier League.
It'll be a points deduction that will guarantee relegation. I'm certain
of that.
Yes.
You think they'll relegate
for the most serious matters?
For over a decade, one club has defined English football.
Coronation year! Manchester City, the kings of English football again!
Since the 2008 takeover, Manchester City have built an empire. Multiple Premier League titles, a record-breaking 100-point season, 4 consecutive league crowns, a historic continental treble in 2023. Power, precision, financial muscle, sustained dominance. But now, there are 115 Premier League charges hanging over that legacy. Allegations spanning nearly a decade, claims of financial rule breaches, questions about reporting, compliance and cooperation. City deny wrongdoing.
Everybody's innocent and, guilt is proven. So, we'll see.
The verdict has not yet been delivered. Nothing has been proven, and yet the conversation is growing louder. Reports of a possible 40-point deduction, even whispers of relegation, hypothetical but seismic if true. If a major points penalty landed mid-season, if it reshaped the title race, if Arsenal's biggest rivals suddenly dropped down the table, this wouldn't just alter one campaign. It would challenge the credibility of the league itself. This is dominance versus regulation, legacy versus legality, power versus process. This is what the 115 charges actually are, what punishment is realistically possible, and how this verdict, whenever it arrives, could permanently reshape English football. To understand why relegation lands so heavily when it's attached to Manchester City, you have to go back to a version of this club that has nothing to do with trophies, billions, or Pep Guardiola. Because City weren't born as a super club. They weren't born as anything glamorous at all. West Gorton, 1880, a working-class area of Manchester shaped by heavy industry and the kind of poverty that makes people look for something to hold on to. St Mark's Church formed a football team, not as a vanity project, not as entertainment, but as a genuine community response, a way to give young men structure, somewhere to belong, something to be part of. That's the seed, and it matters because City's first identity had nothing to do with ambition or status. It was local, it was functional, it was Manchester trying to keep itself together through football. The club grew the way institutions grow, through name changes that tell their own story. St Mark's becomes Ardwick AFC in 1887, taking a more formal shape. Then, in 1894, Ardwick becomes Manchester City, and that rebrand is basically a declaration, not a parish team anymore, a city team. We represent something bigger now. But here's the tension that runs through City's entire history, and it never really goes away. They've always been a club that reaches for something greater, and reality keeps pulling them back down. That's not a romantic reading of it, that's just what happened, repeatedly, across more than a century. From 1923 to 2003, City played at Main Road, and Main Road wasn't just a ground, it had a personality. The kind of place that felt like a carnival one week and a war zone the next. Loud, dense, unpredictable, deeply, unapologetically working class. The numbers back up the mythology. In 1934, Main Road held 84,569 people for an FA Cup tie, still a record for an English club ground. Think about that for a second. We talk about atmosphere like it's something modern stadiums manufacture. Main Road was physically built for it. City had their first proper golden spell in the late 1960s and early 70s. League title, cups, European football. Then came the wobble, then the slide, then the chaos years, which is putting it politely. Because at the end of the 1997-98 season, Manchester City were relegated to the third tier of English football, not the Championship, the third tier. For a club with City's history and fan base, that wasn't just a bad season, that was an existential moment, a what is happening to us moment that supporters of that generation haven't forgotten. And then came the match that City fans will bring up for the rest of their lives. Wembley, May 1999, the Division 2 playoff final against Gillingham. City are 2-0 down with the game almost gone, basically dead. And then they score in the 90th minute, score again in injury time, win on penalties and go up. It's not a trophy, it's not glamorous, but if you want to understand the psychology of a City supporter, the stubbornness, the refusal to accept it's over, the almost irrational belief that something can still happen, that game is the blueprint. When people throw the word relegation around in the context of City's 115 charges, it's not landing as abstract football conversation for supporters who were there through the 90s. It's landing as memory. They've actually been down there. They know what it feels like when the name on the front of your shirt doesn't match the division you're playing in. But here's the crucial difference between then and now, and this is the thing that makes the current situation cut in a completely different way. If City ever faced any kind of punishment from this case, points deductions, expulsion, anything, it wouldn't feel like a football failure. It wouldn't be because the team stopped performing, or the manager lost the dressing room, or the club ran out of money. It would be a governance punishment, an institution penalised by a process, not a team beaten by another team. That distinction changes everything about how history would remember it, and City fans know that, which is part of why the whole thing carries such a particular weight. In 2003, City left Main Road for the city of Manchester, what most people now call the Etihad. On the surface, it's just a ground move. In reality, it's a signal, a club stepping away from its old identity towards something bigger, more modern, more scalable. The tight terraces and smoky floodlights replaced by a bright, clean bowl with room to grow. City were modernising before the money arrived. They were building a stage. They just had no idea who was about to walk onto it. On September 1st, 2008, Abu Dhabi United Group completed their takeover of Manchester City. It's one of the cleanest before and after lines in the history of English football. The important thing to say here is this: the point isn't money bad. That's a lazy take and it misses what actually happened. The point is scale, because that takeover didn't just mean City could spend more on transfers, it fundamentally changed what the club could become. Before 2008, City were a club trying to climb. After 2008, they started operating like a project trying to dominate, and there's a real difference between those two things. Big signings happened fast, yes, but the more significant transformation was structural. Recruitment systems, global scouting networks, executive infrastructure. The whole organisation started behaving like a high-performance institution rather than a football club figuring things out as they went along. That foundation is why what followed felt so relentless. City didn't just get rich, they got organised. Pep Guardiola arrives in 2016, and what follows isn't just a successful period, it's a system era. The right way to frame it isn't by listing trophies, it's by describing the feeling. City started winning in ways that felt like the Premier League almost solved. The 100-point season in 2017-18, the first time any team in the history of the English top flight had reached that number. The domestic treble in the following season, the Champions League as part of a continental treble in 2023, 4 consecutive league titles from 2021 to 2024, something that had never been done in the English top flight. At some point, City stopped being one of the best teams and became the reference point, the standard everything else was measured against. And that's where the story gets complicated, because here's the line that matters. Success doesn't equal guilt, but sustained dominance plus serious financial questions equals attention. The bigger the winning run, the louder the demand becomes for proof that the playing field was level. When one club sets the ceiling for a decade, everything that went into building that ceiling gets examined. That's how we arrive today. So when people talk about relegation in the same breath with these 115 charges, it carries a specific weight for City, not just as a football concept, but as lived experience. They've been in the third third tier. That's not online banter, that's real history, and for a certain generation of supporter, it's real trauma. They've built something extraordinary over the past 15 years, something genuinely unprecedented in English football. And now the question hanging over it all isn't whether the team is good enough, it's whether the institution played the rules while building it. That's the question the next chapter tries to properly answer, because most people arguing about it loudly haven't fully understood what the 115 charges are actually saying. So, let's get into that.
Let's start with the thing that trips almost everyone up. Online, this whole case gets collapsed into one lazy sentence. 115 charges must be 115 fake sponsorships. People hear the number, assume they understand the shape of it, and move on. But that framing misses almost everything that's actually interesting and important about what's being alleged here. The Premier League's case isn't one accusation repeated 115 times. It's a bundle, different categories of alleged rule breaking across different seasons tied together by one central question. Did Manchester City provide truthful, complete financial information under Premier League rules, and did they cooperate with the investigation when it came? The easiest way to understand it is to break it into 4 pillars, because that's essentially what it is. The first pillar is the foundation of the whole case, and it covers the longest stretch of time, the financial reporting allegations. 54 of the charges relate to alleged failure to provide accurate financial information across 9 seasons, from 2009-10 through to 2017-18. That's the core of what the Premier League is saying, that across those years, the numbers City submitted didn't present what the rules call a true and fair picture. Now, this is the moment where language really matters, because this is exactly where people leap from charges to verdicts, and those are very different things. The Premier League is making an allegation. City deny wrongdoing. No decision has been published. We're not at the verdict stage yet. But the reason this pillar is so significant is straightforward. Financial rules only work if the numbers clubs submit can be trusted. If you can't verify the information, you can't enforce anything built on top of it. This is the bedrock. If it holds up, the rest of the case builds on it. If it doesn't, the whole structure weakens. The second pillar tends to get overlooked in the online debate, which is a shame because the allegations around player and manager payments are quietly important. 14 charges relate to alleged failure to properly declare the details of how players and managers were paid, again across the period from 2009-10 through to 2017-18. In plain terms, the Premier League has rules about what clubs must disclose when it comes to remuneration. The allegation isn't necessarily that City paid people, it's that the full picture of how they were paid wasn't properly reported. Why does that matter beyond the technicality? Because financial control rules, like profit and sustainability rules, only function properly when the league has a complete, accurate picture of what money is moving where. If parts of that picture are missing, the whole system of oversight starts operating on bad information. You can't police a rulebook you can't read clearly. The third pillar is where the most confusion lives, and it's the one involving FFP and PSR, so it's worth being precise because this is where people constantly mix up 2 very different processes. 5 charges relate to alleged failures to comply with UEFA's financial fair play rules between 2013-14 and 2017-18. But here's the crucial detail. As those rules were incorporated into the Premier League's own framework at the time. This isn't the UEFA case. That was a separate process and City were cleared. This is the Premier League's own commission, working under its own rulebook, treating those UEFA standards as part of its domestic regulations for those seasons. Then 7 charges relate to alleged breaches of the Premier League's own profit and sustainability rules from 2015-16 to 2017-18. The distinction matters enormously. UEFA is the European regulator. The Premier League is a separate domestic competition with its own rules and its own enforcement process. What happened in UEFA's proceedings has no direct bearing on what this independent commission decides. They are different cases, different processes, different standards of evidence. City being cleared by UEFA does not mean they're cleared here. And then there's the fourth pillar, and in some ways it's the one that changes the entire tone of the case. 35 charges relate to alleged failure to cooperate with the Premier League investigation
investigation between 2018 and 2023. That's the single largest block of the 115. And in a case of this scale and complexity, cooperation isn't a side issue, it's fundamental. The entire ability of a regulator to do its job rests on the assumption that the parties involved will engage with the process, providing documents when asked, answering questions, supplying the information that allows an investigation to actually investigate. The Premier League's allegation, in essence, is that it asked things and didn't get what it needed. City deny this, but if you're thinking about why this case carries so much institutional weight beyond just the financial questions, this is part of the reason. It's not just about accounting anymore, it's about whether the league has the authority to hold its own members to account, and that's a much bigger question. This is the second place where misinformation runs wild. People look at the timeline and say, if this is so serious, why isn't it finished? What's taking so long? The answer is that this isn't a standard football disciplinary hearing. It's closer to a high-stakes regulatory trial. Complex financial evidence across a decade, legal teams on both sides, and an independent commission that needs to assess everything properly before putting anything in writing. The main hearing has concluded. The decision hasn't been published yet, and until it is, everyone, City, their critics, and the league itself, is essentially watching a storm build on the horizon without knowing exactly where it's going to hit. That uncertainty isn't manufactured drama, it's just where things actually stand.
Here's why this story is trending right now, and it's got nothing to do with new legal developments. It's the table. Arsenal are top on 61 points from 28 games. City are 5 points behind, but with a game in hand. That game in hand is the detail that matters. On paper, City are behind. In reality, they're sitting on a result they haven't played yet. For Arsenal fans who've watched City do this before, that's not comfort, that's a countdown. So the title race is already tense, and then you layer the 115 charges on top of it. Suddenly, this isn't just a legal story, it's a table story. No verdict has been reached. City deny wrongdoing, but in the absence of a ruling, people are running the hypotheticals, and in this case, the hypotheticals are seismic. A significant points deduction wouldn't just move one position, it would detonate the entire season. Title race, Champions League spots, relegation battle, everything shifts simultaneously. Either way, when the ruling lands, we'll break it down properly. What it actually says, what it means for the table, and what it does to English football going forward.